Advance, my warriors! Fight for our freedom! Charge! Forward!
The birth of a leader. In the rolling hills and dense forests of what is now Guinea, around 1830, a child named Samori Ture was born into the Mandinka ethnic group. From his earliest days, it was clear that Samori possessed a sharp mind and a fearless spirit. His childhood was shaped by the vibrant culture of his people, a community that combined strong Islamic traditions with local customs, weaving together a rich tapestry of faith, law, and oral history. Even as a young boy, Samori watched his elders navigate disputes, trade, and alliances, absorbing lessons that would later shape his strategic mind. Samori grew up in a period of profound change. The region was a patchwork of small states, each vying for power and security. Foreign traders, carrying rifles and new technologies, began influencing local dynamics. Samori's family, although not of royal blood, held respect within the community, which allowed him access to education and mentorship. He learned to read the Quran and became familiar with traditional Mandinka governance. These dual influences, religion and local politics, formed the foundation of his leadership philosophy, discipline, respect, and strategic thinking. As he matured, Samori showed a natural talent for military strategy. Local skirmishes and raids were common, and young men often learned combat through participation in these encounters. Samori distinguished himself not just with courage but with an ability to analyze situations, predict enemy movements, and make quick, effective decisions. By the time he reached adulthood, he had earned a reputation as a sharp-minded and capable warrior. Around the 1850s, Samori began forming alliances with neighboring leaders, consolidating smaller groups under his command. His vision extended beyond personal power. He sought to create a structured state that could resist external threats and provide security for his people. Trade played a key role in this strategy. Samori recognized the value of firearms, recruiting merchants to supply his growing army. Unlike many contemporaries, he balanced traditional warfare methods with modern innovations, making his forces unusually disciplined and adaptable. Religion also played a crucial role in Samori's rise. He positioned himself as a protector of Islam, which resonated with local communities. Mosques and schools flourished under his guidance, and religious leaders often supported his campaigns. This dual focus on spiritual authority and military prowess allowed him to unite diverse groups under a single banner. His leadership style combined respect for elders, strategic thinking, and strict discipline, earning him loyalty that would prove essential in the conflicts to come. By the late 1850s, Samori Ture had transformed from a promising young warrior into a regional power. Small states in the upper Niger region began to acknowledge his authority, either through alliances or subjugation. He moved strategically, expanding his territory while avoiding unnecessary conflict, ensuring that each conquest strengthened his base. His army, composed of both seasoned warriors and newly recruited fighters, became a symbol of unity and resilience. Samori's vision was ambitious. He wanted to create a lasting empire capable of defending against the encroaching European powers. At this time, French colonial influence was beginning to spread across West Africa. Traders and explorers carried news of European expansion, and Samori understood the stakes. His careful planning, investment in training, and emphasis on loyalty positioned him as one of the region's most formidable leaders, even before the arrival of direct colonial confrontation. As the chapter of his early life closed, Samori Ture stood at the threshold of greatness. From a curious and courageous boy, he had become a leader with a clear vision, respected by both allies and rivals. His journey would soon extend beyond regional politics, leading him into epic confrontations with one of the world's most powerful empires. The stage was set for a story of leadership, strategy, and resistance that would leave an indelible mark on West African history. The rise of the Wassoulou Empire. By the early 1860s, Samori Ture's influence had expanded far beyond his birthplace. The young commander had transformed into a formidable strategist, respected and sometimes feared by neighboring communities. His vision of unifying the fragmented regions of the upper Niger basin began to take shape in earnest. Samori's approach combined diplomacy, trade, and military discipline, allowing him to consolidate smaller states under his leadership and lay the foundation for what would become the Wassoulou Empire. Samori understood that survival in a region of constant conflict required more than brute force. He developed an organized military structure, introducing hierarchical ranks, training regiments, and supply systems that were revolutionary for West African armies at the time. Soldiers were drilled to march in formation, maintain discipline under pressure, and respond to complex battle maneuvers. Firearms obtained through trade with North African merchants and European intermediaries were integrated alongside traditional weapons like spears and bows, giving his forces a significant tactical advantage over rivals. Trade was central to Samori's strategy. He controlled key routes that connected the interior of West Africa with coastal trading posts. Through careful negotiation and occasionally decisive military action, he secured access to weapons, ammunition, and essential supplies. These resources allowed him to maintain a well-equipped, mobile army capable of striking quickly across a wide territory. His growing empire was not only militarily strong but economically strategic, combining commerce and governance in ways that strengthened loyalty among local chiefs and communities. Religion also shaped Samori's rise. As a devout Muslim, he framed his leadership in terms of spiritual as well as political authority. Mosques and Islamic schools received his protection and patronage, and religious leaders often endorsed his campaigns, lending legitimacy to his rule. This alliance between faith and military power enabled him to unify diverse ethnic groups, creating a sense of shared purpose that went beyond local allegiances. Samori's reputation as a defender of Islam and protector of his people spread across West Africa, attracting warriors and administrators eager to join his cause. By the mid-1860s, Samori had expanded his influence into regions that today form parts of Guinea, Mali, and Ivory Coast. His strategy was deliberate. He avoided unnecessary battles that could drain resources while targeting rival chiefs whose defeat would consolidate his control. Villages and towns under his protection benefited from organized governance, security, and access to trade networks. This combination of military skill, administrative organization, and religious legitimacy solidified his reputation as a visionary leader. The army itself became a reflection of Samori's leadership philosophy. Loyalty was rewarded, discipline was strictly enforced, and merit was recognized regardless of one's background. Samori personally trained his commanders, teaching them not only tactics and strategy but also the importance of integrity, morale, and careful planning. This approach created a cohesive fighting force capable of executing complex maneuvers and adapting to rapidly changing circumstances on the battlefield. Even as Samori consolidated his empire, he faced constant challenges. Rival leaders, jealous of his growing power, frequently launched attacks, and maintaining alliances required careful negotiation. Yet, his combination of military skill, political acumen, and religious authority allowed him to maintain dominance. By the late 1860s, the foundation of the Wassoulou Empire was secure, a centralized state with a disciplined army, a structured economy, and a unified cultural and religious identity. As the Wassoulou Empire rose, news of European colonial ambitions began to filter into West Africa. The French were expanding inland from their coastal territories, and Samori quickly realized that a new kind of threat loomed on the horizon. His preparations for defense, both militarily and administratively, became more urgent. The empire he had built with careful strategy and unwavering vision was about to face challenges that would test the limits of his leadership and the resilience of his people. Chapter 2 closes with Samori Ture firmly established as the architect of a rising empire. He had transformed from a regional warlord into a visionary leader whose ambition, discipline, and strategic insight would define the next decades of West African history. The stage was set for encounters with colonial forces, where Samori's tactical brilliance and the loyalty of his army would be tested like never before. The first campaigns. By the early 1870s, Samori Ture's Wassoulou Empire had grown from a collection of allied states into a formidable regional power. With a disciplined army, strategic alliances, and control over trade routes, he began expanding his territory through carefully planned campaigns. These initial military operations were less about reckless conquest and more about consolidating power, securing borders, and demonstrating the strength of his leadership. Samori's approach to warfare was revolutionary for West Africa at the time. He emphasized mobility, coordination, and disciplined formations, ensuring that his forces could respond effectively to multiple threats simultaneously. Each campaign began with extensive planning. Scouts would gather intelligence on enemy positions, terrain, and resources, while Samori personally oversaw the organization of supplies, routes, and troop rotations. His armies were trained to march long distances without losing cohesion, allowing them to appear suddenly in strategic locations and overwhelm rivals. The first significant campaigns were aimed at neighboring chiefs who resisted Samori's vision of a unified state. These confrontations were often swift but decisive. Rather than indiscriminate violence, Samori emphasized precision and strategy. Villages that submitted peacefully were integrated into his administrative system, allowed to retain local governance under his supervision, and benefited from protection and trade opportunities. Those that resisted faced military pressure, but Samori's objective was always control, not unnecessary destruction. Trade and logistics were key components of these campaigns. Samori ensured that his army had access to firearms, ammunition, and food supplies, often negotiating with merchants and local communities before moving into new territories. His strategic use of rivers and roads allowed for rapid troop movement and surprise attacks, giving him an advantage over more traditional regional forces. This combination of organization, discipline, and innovation became a hallmark of his military leadership. Religion continued to play a critical role in consolidating power. Samori framed his campaigns as a defense of Islam, portraying his efforts as protecting his people and faith from internal division and outside interference. This not only strengthened loyalty among his soldiers but also encouraged cooperation from local communities. Clerics and scholars often accompanied his army, helping to mediate conflicts and ensure that conquered regions were integrated smoothly into the empire. The campaigns also revealed Samori's skill in administration. Conquered territories were reorganized with appointed governors who reported directly to him, while taxation and trade regulations were standardized to strengthen the economic base of the empire. His ability to combine military success with political governance set him apart from many contemporary African leaders. The Wassoulou Empire was not just an army, it was a structured state capable of sustaining itself and projecting power across a vast region. One notable campaign involved a series of rapid movements through the borderlands of modern-day Mali and Ivory Coast. Samori's forces, numbering in the thousands, utilized guerrilla tactics alongside conventional military maneuvers. His commanders were trained to respond independently if separated from the main force, reflecting his emphasis on initiative and discipline. These early victories enhanced Samori's reputation, attracting additional warriors to his cause and reinforcing the loyalty of his existing troops. Despite these successes, challenges remained. Rival states occasionally formed alliances to resist his expansion, and internal dissent required careful attention. Samori's ability to negotiate, reward loyalty, and enforce discipline ensured that the empire remained cohesive even in the face of resistance. His leadership was marked by a balance of strategic patience and decisive action, a combination that allowed him to maintain momentum while avoiding overextension. By the end of the decade, Samori Ture had firmly established himself as the dominant power in the region. His first campaigns had expanded the boundaries of the Wassoulou Empire, strengthened its military, and enhanced its economic and religious infrastructure. He had demonstrated that leadership was not solely about conquest but about vision, strategy, and the ability to inspire loyalty. As Chapter 3 closes, Samori Ture's empire stood as a model of disciplined organization and strategic brilliance. Yet the horizon held new challenges. The encroachment of European colonial powers, particularly the French, would soon test the limits of his military innovation and political acumen, setting the stage for conflicts that would define the next phase of his remarkable career. The first encounters with the French. By the 1880s, Samori Ture's Wassoulou Empire had grown into a powerful West African state, stretching across regions of present-day Guinea, Mali, and Ivory Coast. His disciplined army, strategic leadership, and administrative reforms had made him a respected figure among local rulers. However, the rising presence of European colonial powers, particularly the French, introduced an unprecedented challenge. For the first time, Samori faced an external force whose military technology, resources, and ambition were unlike anything the region had seen before. The French expansion into West Africa during this period was part of a broader colonial push known as the Scramble for Africa. Their objective was to secure trade routes, access raw materials, and extend political control inland from coastal forts. Initially, the French relied on treaties, trade agreements, and local alliances to extend influence, but they quickly turned to military expeditions when resistance arose. Samori Ture, with his growing empire, represented both a strategic obstacle and a symbolic challenge to colonial ambitions. Aware of the threat, Samori adopted a proactive approach. He strengthened his army, stockpiling firearms and ammunition, and reorganized his command structure to allow greater flexibility in response to fast-moving French forces. His army, trained in both traditional West African tactics and European-inspired maneuvers, could adapt to open-field battles, ambushes, and guerrilla-style engagements. Samori also developed a network of scouts and informants to track French movements, ensuring that his forces would rarely be caught by surprise. The first encounters with French forces were tense and cautious. Samori sought to avoid unnecessary bloodshed while asserting the sovereignty of his empire. Negotiations and warnings accompanied early skirmishes, but misunderstandings and competing ambitions made conflict increasingly likely. When clashes did occur, Samori's forces demonstrated remarkable discipline, using superior knowledge of local terrain, rapid troop movements, and well-coordinated attacks to challenge French columns. These engagements revealed his military acumen and reinforced his reputation as a formidable strategist. Samori's leadership style during these encounters was both inspirational and pragmatic. He personally oversaw the training of new recruits, ensuring that his soldiers were well prepared for the rigors of war. Commanders were selected based on merit, loyalty, and tactical skill, and each unit was given clear objectives and autonomy to respond to changing battlefield conditions. Communication relied on a combination of runners, signals, and prearranged strategies, allowing for coordinated action across large distances. In addition to military preparedness, Samori recognized the importance of logistics and morale. Armies could not survive without food, water, and medical care, especially during prolonged engagements or retreats. He implemented supply networks that followed his forces, using rivers, roads, and local communities to maintain consistent support. Religious leaders and local officials helped maintain morale, framing resistance as a defense of the Wassoulou Empire, its people, and Islamic values. Despite his preparation, the French presented an ongoing challenge. Their firearms, disciplined formations, and strategic experience forced Samori to innovate continuously. He employed mobile warfare, retreating when necessary to regroup and strike in unexpected locations. His ability to adapt, anticipate enemy moves, and maintain the loyalty of his troops allowed him to resist the French far longer than many anticipated. These early encounters also shaped the political landscape. Neighboring states observed the conflict closely, weighing alliances and the risks of siding with either Samori or the French. Samori's skill in diplomacy and his reputation for fairness helped him maintain support and deter potential rivals from attacking his territories while he confronted the colonial threat. By the end of Chapter 4, Samori Ture had entered a new phase of leadership. His empire was no longer only concerned with regional dominance, it now faced the existential challenge of resisting European colonization. These initial confrontations with the French demonstrated his tactical brilliance, his ability to inspire loyalty, and his vision of a sovereign West African state capable of defending its people and culture. The stage was set for more intense campaigns that would define both his legacy and the history of resistance in West Africa. Chapter 5: Battles and Strategic Retreats. By the mid-1880s, Samori Ture faced mounting pressure from French colonial forces. The Wassoulou Empire, once primarily focused on regional consolidation, now confronted an opponent with superior technology, larger resources, and a relentless determination to expand inland. Samori understood that survival required not just courage on the battlefield but adaptability, discipline, and innovative strategies. His leadership during this period became a defining aspect of his legacy. The French, advancing along river valleys and established trade routes, attempted to impose control over key territories within Samori's empire. Unlike local rivals, they relied on standardized military formations, artillery, and a consistent supply chain. Samori quickly realized that traditional frontal assaults would be costly and potentially devastating. Instead, he embraced mobile warfare, guerrilla tactics, and strategic retreats, turning the terrain itself into an ally. Dense forests, rivers, and rolling hills became defensive tools, allowing his forces to ambush, delay, and wear down the enemy. One hallmark of Samori's strategy was the careful management of his army's movements. Retreats were not signs of weakness but calculated maneuvers designed to preserve his forces, regroup, and strike at opportune moments. Villages and towns were evacuated strategically, resources hidden or relocated, and temporary fortifications erected in defensible positions. This method of fighting extended the conflict, forcing the French to stretch their supply lines and contend with an enemy that was never fully exposed. Samori's troops were highly disciplined, trained to follow orders precisely even during complex maneuvers. He organized his commanders into regional units with delegated authority, allowing them to respond quickly to changing circumstances. Scouts provided early warning of enemy movements, while supply networks ensured that food, ammunition, and equipment reached units even in remote locations. This combination of preparation, mobility, and morale enabled Samori to sustain resistance far longer than most contemporaries would have imagined. Religion and cultural identity continued to play a crucial role in sustaining the army's morale. Samori positioned himself as both a political and spiritual leader, framing resistance as a defense of Islamic values and the sovereignty of the Wassoulou Empire. Clerics and local leaders accompanied his forces, mediating disputes, encouraging discipline, and maintaining the loyalty of communities caught between the warring sides. Soldiers and civilians alike were inspired by this sense of shared purpose, reinforcing unity even in the face of prolonged conflict. Several significant confrontations during this period illustrated Samori's tactical brilliance. In one campaign, his forces engaged the French in a series of skirmishes along a river corridor, using small, mobile units to harass and delay the enemy while larger forces prepared defensive positions inland. These actions forced the French to expend resources and manpower while exposing the limitations of their formations in difficult terrain. Samori's ability to combine deception, rapid movement, and coordinated attacks showcased his mastery of both conventional and unconventional warfare. Beyond battlefield tactics, Samori also emphasized governance and administration during these turbulent times. Territories under his control were reorganized to maintain stability, with local leaders accountable to central authority and supply networks protected from disruption. This dual focus on military defense and administrative order allowed the Wassoulou Empire to remain functional and resilient even as French incursions threatened its borders. The period of battles and strategic retreats also highlighted Samori's leadership qualities. He demonstrated patience, foresight, and a willingness to adapt strategies to changing circumstances. His insistence on discipline, loyalty, and training ensured that his forces remained effective despite limited resources and constant pressure. Over time, his reputation as a tactician and protector of his people grew, inspiring both fear and respect among allies and opponents alike. By the end of Chapter 5, Samori Ture had solidified his reputation as a master strategist. The Wassoulou Empire, though increasingly pressured by French forces, remained resilient. His careful use of mobility, guerrilla tactics, and strategic retreats had prolonged resistance and preserved the core of his army. The stage was set for more intense confrontations that would test his leadership, resilience, and the very survival of his empire in the coming years. Chapter 6: Expansion and Consolidation. By the late 1880s, Samori Ture's Wassoulou Empire had reached a critical juncture. While his forces had skillfully resisted French incursions through strategic retreats and guerrilla tactics, Samori knew that long-term survival required not only defense but also expansion and consolidation. He focused on strengthening political alliances, controlling key trade routes, and integrating newly acquired territories into a cohesive state. Samori's expansion into areas of modern-day Mali and northern Ivory Coast marked a significant phase of the empire's growth. These regions were strategically important, containing fertile lands, trade corridors, and settlements that could provide recruits, supplies, and tax revenue. Samori approached this expansion with careful planning, ensuring that newly conquered areas were not only subdued militarily but also politically and administratively integrated. Local chiefs were offered positions within his governance structure, incentivizing cooperation while maintaining central authority. The military campaigns of this period demonstrated both the skill and discipline of Samori's forces. He relied on a combination of traditional West African warfare and innovative strategies adapted from European methods. Soldiers were trained to execute complex maneuvers, maintain supply lines, and respond effectively to ambushes or counterattacks. Firearms were deployed alongside spears and bows, creating a versatile force capable of operating in forests, savannas, and river valleys. The army's mobility allowed Samori to strike swiftly, securing key locations before rival powers could respond. Samori also recognized the importance of internal organization. He divided the empire into regions, each overseen by trusted commanders who reported directly to him. These commanders were responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and ensuring that soldiers were ready for deployment. The centralized system strengthened the empire's resilience, making it more difficult for external forces to destabilize. This combination of military, political, and economic control created a well-structured state capable of sustaining long-term resistance. Trade remained a critical factor in the empire's growth. Samori controlled routes that connected the interior to coastal trading posts, ensuring a steady flow of resources, including firearms, ammunition, and food. He negotiated with merchants and local leaders to secure supplies, demonstrating both diplomacy and strategic foresight. The empire's economic strength underpinned its military capacity, allowing Samori to maintain a disciplined, well-equipped army. Religion continued to unify the diverse population within the Wassoulou Empire. Samori emphasized the protection and promotion of Islam, establishing mosques, schools, and religious courts. This spiritual authority reinforced his political legitimacy and helped maintain loyalty among conquered peoples. Clerics and scholars often served as advisors, mediators, and moral guides, ensuring that governance was consistent with local traditions and Islamic principles. During this period, Samori also strengthened his defensive capabilities in anticipation of future French advances. Fortified towns, stockpiled weapons, and well-trained militias created a network of strongholds that could delay or repel enemy incursions. Samori's foresight allowed the empire to operate both offensively and defensively, adapting to the changing dynamics of colonial warfare. Despite these successes, challenges persisted. Rival factions occasionally resisted integration, and the ever-present threat of French expansion required constant vigilance. Samori's ability to balance military campaigns, administrative duties, and diplomacy became a hallmark of his leadership. His decisions were deliberate, calculated, and aimed at preserving both the sovereignty and stability of the Wassoulou Empire. By the end of Chapter 6, Samori Ture had not only expanded his territory but also strengthened the internal cohesion of his empire. The Wassoulou Empire stood as a model of disciplined organization, strategic governance, and cultural unity. Samori's vision of a strong, self-sufficient West African state capable of resisting colonial encroachment had become a reality, even as the French continued to press forward. His leadership, strategic brilliance, and adaptability positioned him to face the critical conflicts that would define the final decades of his reign. Intensified conflict with the French. By the early 1890s, the Wassoulou Empire had reached both its peak and its most perilous moment. Samori Ture's strategic brilliance and disciplined army had successfully resisted French encroachment for over a decade, yet the colonial forces were growing increasingly organized, well-armed, and determined to bring West Africa under European control. Samori faced a dual challenge, defending his empire while continuing to maintain internal cohesion among a diverse population of subjects and allies. The French approach had evolved. They combined direct military campaigns with political maneuvering, seeking to isolate Samori from potential allies and disrupt his supply lines. Expeditions moved deeper inland, using river routes and fortified outposts to project power. Samori responded with a combination of mobility, deception, and fortified defensive positions. He avoided direct confrontation when it risked heavy losses and instead relied on ambushes, hit-and-run tactics, and rapid redeployment to frustrate the enemy. One of Samori's signature strategies during this period was the use of fortified towns and stockades. These strongholds allowed him to protect civilians, secure supplies, and create defensive positions that slowed the French advance. Each fortification was strategically placed near rivers, trade routes, or natural barriers, maximizing the advantages of terrain. Soldiers were trained to defend these positions effectively while remaining ready to launch counterattacks or retreat strategically if necessary. The empire's administrative system played a crucial role in sustaining resistance. Samori ensured that governors, military commanders, and religious leaders coordinated closely. Supply chains were maintained even under threat, allowing troops to remain well-equipped and fed. Civilian populations contributed to the war effort through logistics, intelligence gathering, and local governance, reinforcing a sense of collective purpose. This integration of military, political, and civilian structures made the Wassoulou Empire resilient despite mounting external pressure. Samori also demonstrated remarkable flexibility in diplomacy. He negotiated with neighboring rulers, formed temporary alliances, and sometimes even purchased peace to buy time for strategic redeployment. His reputation for fairness and protection of Islamic values helped secure loyalty and support, even among newly integrated communities. This political acumen allowed him to maintain cohesion in the empire while confronting one of the most formidable military powers of the era. During this period, several significant engagements occurred along the Niger River corridor and surrounding territories. Samori's forces, although often outnumbered and outgunned, used superior knowledge of local terrain, coordinated maneuvers, and disciplined firepower to resist French columns. These encounters highlighted his ability to combine conventional and guerrilla warfare effectively, drawing on both traditional West African military practices and lessons learned from European tactics. Despite these successes, the conflict took a heavy toll. Continuous warfare strained resources, disrupted trade, and caused hardship among civilian populations. Samori faced difficult decisions, balancing the need to protect his people with the demands of sustaining a fighting force. His leadership during this period emphasized foresight, strategic patience, and the careful weighing of risks versus rewards. Every move was calculated, and retreats were seen as a means to preserve the empire rather than a sign of defeat. The intensity of the French campaign forced Samori to innovate continuously. He implemented mobile supply units, trained specialized troops for reconnaissance, and coordinated simultaneous attacks across multiple fronts. His ability to adapt to changing circumstances, combined with his unwavering commitment to the sovereignty of his empire, earned him respect from allies and caution from enemies. By the end of Chapter 7, Samori Ture had demonstrated that leadership in the face of overwhelming odds required more than bravery. It demanded strategy, vision, and the ability to inspire loyalty. The Wassoulou Empire remained a symbol of resistance against colonial conquest, standing resilient even as European forces increased their efforts to subdue it. Samori's legacy as a tactician, statesman, and protector of his people continued to grow, setting the stage for the final, defining years of his struggle. Chapter 8: The Final Campaigns. By the mid-1890s, Samori Ture faced the greatest challenge of his leadership. The French forces, now better equipped and organized, advanced with relentless determination, aiming to dismantle the Wassoulou Empire. For over 20 years, Samori had resisted European colonial expansion, using disciplined troops, guerrilla tactics, and strategic retreats. Yet the scale and persistence of the French campaign tested every aspect of his leadership, from military strategy to diplomacy and governance. Samori's response combined defensive ingenuity with aggressive maneuvers. He reorganized his army into highly mobile units capable of rapid deployment across the empire's vast territory. Scouts and messengers provided crucial intelligence, tracking French movements and identifying vulnerabilities. Soldiers were trained to fight, retreat, and regroup in a coordinated manner, allowing Samori to maintain resistance even when faced with superior firepower. The use of rivers, forests, and hills became central to his defensive strategy, turning the natural landscape into an ally. Fortified towns and temporary encampments became critical to sustaining the empire. Samori ensured that key locations had food supplies, ammunition stockpiles, and secure shelters for civilians. These strongholds slowed French advances and provided staging points for counterattacks. Samori also implemented mobile supply networks, ensuring that troops remained operational even during long retreats or extended engagements. Each maneuver was meticulously planned to preserve the core of his forces while inflicting maximum strategic impact on the enemy. Diplomacy remained an essential tool. Samori negotiated with neighboring rulers, forming temporary alliances and securing loyalty to prevent revolts within his territories. He leveraged his reputation as a fair and capable leader, protector of Islam, and defender of West African sovereignty. Religious leaders and local administrators reinforced his authority, ensuring that even as battles raged, governance and social order continued within the empire. The battles of this period demonstrated Samori's adaptability and tactical brilliance. In several encounters along rivers and trade routes, his forces used ambushes and rapid flanking maneuvers to disrupt French columns. These actions delayed colonial advances and bought critical time for regrouping and reinforcing defensive positions. Samori's ability to combine conventional army formations with guerrilla tactics made him a highly elusive opponent, earning him both respect and frustration from French commanders. However, the sustained pressure began to strain the Wassoulou Empire. Continuous campaigns disrupted trade, reduced resources, and placed enormous demands on soldiers and civilians alike. Samori faced difficult choices, balancing the need to resist with the imperative to preserve the population and maintain the integrity of the empire. Strategic retreats became increasingly necessary, not as acts of defeat, but as measures to safeguard his forces and prolong resistance. Despite the challenges, Samori's leadership remained steadfast. He emphasized training, discipline, and morale, ensuring that his army could continue fighting even in adverse conditions. Communication and coordination among commanders were critical, allowing units to operate independently while remaining aligned with overall strategy. This resilience underscored the sophisticated organization of the Wassoulou military, reflecting years of experience, foresight, and strategic planning. By the end of Chapter 8, it was clear that the final years of Samori Ture's resistance would be defined by endurance, ingenuity, and the struggle to protect a sovereign West African state against overwhelming colonial power. The French continued to press forward, but Samori's combination of leadership, tactical skill, and strategic foresight ensured that the empire remained a formidable force. The story of these final campaigns would cement his legacy as one of Africa's greatest anti-colonial leaders, demonstrating the power of vision, discipline, and unwavering commitment to freedom. Chapter 9: Capture and Exile. By the late 1890s, the relentless pressure of the French colonial campaign had begun to overwhelm the Wassoulou Empire. Samori Ture, once able to outmaneuver and frustrate European forces, now faced an opponent with superior numbers, artillery, and logistical support. Despite his decades of skillful leadership, strategic retreats, and disciplined army, the empire was nearing a critical breaking point. Samori's forces continued to resist fiercely, employing guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and mobile operations across the forests, rivers, and savannas of West Africa. His army remained highly disciplined, and his ability to inspire loyalty among his soldiers was remarkable. However, the sustained pressure of the French, combined with dwindling resources and the challenges of coordinating resistance over a vast territory, gradually eroded the empire's defenses. In 1898, after years of maneuvering and evading French columns, Samori Ture was finally captured. The French had meticulously pursued him, cutting off supply lines and isolating his forces. Despite attempts to escape and regroup, his army could no longer sustain prolonged resistance against the better-equipped colonial forces. Samori's capture marked the end of his active leadership and a pivotal moment in West African resistance to European expansion. Following his capture, Samori was exiled to Gabon, a remote region along the West African coast. The exile was designed to remove him from any possibility of returning to power, effectively ending the sovereignty of the Wassoulou Empire. In Gabon, Samori lived under French supervision, far from the lands he had once ruled and defended so skillfully. Even in captivity, he retained the respect of those around him, remembered as a courageous leader who had fought tirelessly for his people and culture. The fall of the Wassoulou Empire was a direct consequence of the technological, logistical, and organizational advantages of European colonial forces. However, Samori Ture's legacy endured beyond military defeat. He had demonstrated that a disciplined, strategically led African state could resist colonial expansion for years, challenging assumptions of European superiority. His leadership, strategic brilliance, and ability to unite diverse communities became a model of resistance across West Africa. The exile of Samori Ture also had profound symbolic significance. He embodied the resilience, intelligence, and determination of West African leadership in the face of foreign domination. Stories of his campaigns, strategic retreats, and battles spread widely, inspiring other leaders and communities to assert autonomy and resist colonial encroachment. Even in defeat, Samori's life remained a testament to the strength of vision, organization, and loyalty. Samori's death in Gabon in 1900 marked the end of his personal struggle, but his impact on the region persisted. The Wassoulou Empire, though conquered, had left an enduring legacy of disciplined military organization, political foresight, and cultural unity. Samori Ture's resistance against French colonialism became an important chapter in West African history, symbolizing both the possibilities and limitations of African states confronting European expansion. By the end of Chapter 9, the story of Samori Ture was both one of remarkable achievement and inevitable challenge. His empire had lasted decades, his army had resisted a powerful colonial force, and his leadership had inspired loyalty, discipline, and courage. Though captured and exiled, Samori's life remained a powerful example of strategic genius, resilience, and dedication to the sovereignty and welfare of his people. Chapter 10: Legacy of a Leader. The life of Samori Ture, which ended in exile in Gabon in 1900, left a profound and lasting impact on West African history. Though he was ultimately captured by French colonial forces, his leadership, strategic brilliance, and unwavering commitment to the sovereignty of his people cemented his reputation as one of Africa's greatest anti-colonial leaders. The Wassoulou Empire, which he had built through vision, discipline, and diplomacy, became a symbol of resistance against foreign domination. Samori's legacy is multifaceted. Militarily, he demonstrated that African states could organize disciplined armies capable of resisting European forces for extended periods. His use of mobile warfare, strategic retreats, fortified positions, and well-trained troops highlighted his deep understanding of both terrain and tactics. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Samori combined traditional African military practices with modern innovations such as firearms and structured logistics, creating a highly effective and adaptive fighting force. Beyond the battlefield, Samori Ture was a visionary administrator. He established centralized governance across diverse territories, integrating conquered peoples into a cohesive political and economic system. Local leaders were incorporated into the empire's administration, trade routes were secured, and taxation and resource management were standardized. Religious authority, particularly the promotion of Islam, further unified the empire and reinforced loyalty among his subjects. This combination of military and administrative skill allowed the Wassoulou Empire to endure under immense pressure. Samori's resistance also carried immense symbolic significance. At a time when European colonial powers were expanding across Africa, his ability to challenge French forces for nearly 2 decades challenged prevailing assumptions about African military and political capabilities. Stories of his courage, intelligence, and strategic foresight inspired generations of leaders and communities, fostering a sense of pride and determination in the struggle for autonomy and self-determination. Even in exile, Samori remained a respected figure. His dignity, wisdom, and adherence to principles earned him admiration among both Africans and Europeans who encountered him. Though removed from the lands he had ruled, his influence persisted through oral histories, cultural memory, and the enduring recognition of his achievements. His life exemplified the qualities of leadership, vision, discipline, courage, and the ability to inspire loyalty among diverse peoples. The fall of the Wassoulou Empire ultimately demonstrated the overwhelming power of European colonial forces, but it also highlighted the resilience and capability of African states. Samori Ture's decades-long resistance revealed the possibilities of strategic planning, disciplined military organization, and thoughtful governance in the face of formidable external threats. His story remains a critical chapter in understanding the broader narrative of African resistance to colonization and the complex dynamics of 19th-century West African politics. Today, Samori Ture is remembered not only as a military leader but also as a symbol of courage, strategic intelligence, and unwavering dedication to his people. The cities, towns, and communities that survived his campaigns carried forward the administrative and social structures he established,